Alright, hello, I am Don Stanczyk, and this is my conservation plan for the Bay of Campeche. So on this slide, you can see just a little map of where it is. You can note some cool things. You can see the lagoon, some major cities nearby. You can look really close, you can see some little blue lines for some rivers, all of which will be important to note throughout my presentation here. Alright, so some background information on the bay is that it is in the southwest side of the Gulf of Mexico. So this is the Gulf of Mexico picture, and you can see it be right around here. It's an estimated 6,000 square miles in size. Deepest point is about 180 feet. Many rivers flow into the bay. Now, a little warning is, please excuse my pronunciation of the words of the cities, the rivers, and the lagoon, and many other things throughout this presentation. I have no idea how to say a lot of them, but anyways, here are some of the major rivers that flow into the bay. The Papalopan, the Catlascos, and the Gurjavla, Umascata, and the Candelaria. There are also many swamps and low-lying shores along the bay, the most popular being the Terminus Lagoon, which you can actually see right here in this picture, so pretty big to be able to be seen from a satellite picture. All right, some more information to continue. Other major port cities include Veracruz, Catsalucarska, which is actually one of the names of the river, and then Ciudad del Carmen and Campeche. This bottom picture is actually some of the beautiful buildings you can see in Campeche. In the 1980s, the Bay of Campeche was one of the world's top oil-producing areas, bringing in a lot of economic benefits to Mexico. The bay is a beachy tropical environment attracting many tourists year-round. The summer months, water temperatures are high, making the bay a perfect breeding ground for marine life. And storms. So the Bay of Campeche is a hot spot for formations of tropical storms. Living in the United States, living in Florida, we know, for me specifically, that a lot of storms come from this area. It's either in the Gulf or off the coast of Africa in the Atlantic Ocean. We actually just recently had Cristobal, which hit Louisiana with a tropical storm, and it formed here earlier this summer. Also, the bay is also a graveyard for hurricanes. So you can see Franklin in this top picture here, kind of started around the Gulf of Mexico and around here, and ended in the bay. So, the Bay River and the Gulf of Mexico is heavily packed with human developments, which intensifies the destruction brought by the storms. The rainwater from these storms cause increased sedimentation along the coastlines and the pushing of pollutants into the bay. So those two are bolded in my PowerPoint because those are going to be the main things I'm going to talk about in my conservation plan. So this photo below was taken by NASA, which shows the sediment plume. You can see how this is sediment here. That's why it's like green and murky looking, that has pushed from the rainstorms out into the bay. This can cause many of the coastal habitats to be destroyed, reshaping many parts of the bay. So this can be negative on many of the species that live in this area. So runoff is from industrial and residential developments along the rivers have negatively impacted on the species that live in and around the bay. So when the rainwater pushes, it pushes all of that gunk and junk out of those rivers and the lagoon and into the bay. And the fertilizer from people's yards and to keep the grass nice, and then many other things, pollutions and stuff put off from those industrial places, can spike these algae blooms in the river mouths. So where the river mouth is when like the river opens up into the bay, so can suffocate and poison much of the marine and wildlife in those areas, and can negatively impact fishing businesses around the coastline of Mexico. So the species of the Gulf, there are many. There's a very wide range of biodiversity there. Shipwrecks and sunken ships from pirates, back in the 16th, 19th century are commonly found there, and also they do sink many ships to make artificial reefs for these animals to have a nice habitat to live in. So tarpon fishing is very popular in the Bay of Campeche. It's a big tourist thing to do when you go and visit Campeche, besides some other stuff I'll talk about later on. And then other fish found in the Gulf that also attract many fishermen and tourists can be seen in this little diagram that I put over here, which I can name a few species. There are sharks, marlin, snapper, I think there's grouper, there's a stingray down there, and a bunch of other stuff. So, and of course, besides these fish, the Gulf also has many other types of organisms. These include sea turtles, shellfish, meaning scallops, crabs, and crustaceans and stuff like that, and some marine mammals. So, dolphins, everyone's favorite. Right. So, in this picture here, you can see a man with his tarpon that he caught fishing, 2 dolphins, a sunken ship that could resemble a reef, and the artificial reef, you can see all the biodiversity here, and a little sea turtle nesting on shore. So the river species. So like I said, there's multiple rivers that flow into the bay, and there's just the lagoon as well. But rivers can act as nursery grounds for many of these fish that come from the Gulf and the bay. They swim in there, have their babies in there some, and then leave, and then those babies can, until they feel like they're able to go be out in the ocean, support themselves, go out there. So it's a very important part of a lot of these Gulf life cycle, the species in the Gulf's life cycle. So the endangered jaguars that also live in the rivers in Campeche rely on the rivers for water and food source. And then on hot days, they can go in and rest in the waters, and they're so cute. And they're endangered, and you can really find them in like Mexico and like South America regions and stuff like that. So it's kind of important. And then the Morelet crocodile, otherwise known as the Mexican crocodile, is a well-known resident of the freshwater regions of the rivers that flow into the bay. So they're going to be way farther up on the rivers. But still, they're going to be impacted by whatever happens in the bay, lower down the rivers, and in the Gulf. So the bay's coastline and the Yucatan Peninsula is the only place you can find these crocs in the world. So basically, the whole section up here that's like on the Gulf is impacted, like impacts these crocs. And they're also closely related to the American crocodile, so it's pretty cool. So then, as I've been talking about throughout going through the species, is the impact that they have. So the runoff and increase in sediments from the rivers and bay impact the Gulf of Mexico as a whole, which would impact the United States coastline, other parts of Mexico, and even into some parts of the Caribbean. And then if the river water gets polluted or reshaped due to the storms, then the jaguars, crocodiles, and marine organisms that live in and around those areas are negatively impacted. Endangered sea turtles who nest along the shores and the tarpon that use the river mouths as nursery grounds are also affected. So that rainwater can cause some quite negative effects. And then for some residents who are also impacted by this. Local residents of the Bay of Campeche is a mixture of resort owners, working class, low income, and rich. So it's a wide range of people. In major cities, there are more developed population, is large and diverse. In smaller, undeveloped regions, the population is poor and more dependent on the natural local resources, such as fishing, being a main source of food. Many of the Bay's cities have rich history. So as you can see in this top picture, this is a Mayan temple, big one that a lot of people learn in history class in grade school and middle school. So a lot of people go to this area for tourist reasons as it is, besides just the bay and the beautiful scenery. And the cities are dependent on being major port cities, oil dredging, and fishery industries for the economy success. So without these bays and keeping them nice and clean and functionable, their government would start to decline significantly. Economy, not government. So the oil spills, which when you talk about the Gulf of Mexico, you always have to talk about oil spills. It's kind of a very important thing that goes on there, and it really does impact all the life and organisms that rely on the Gulf of Mexico for multiple things, both humans and marine life. So in 1979, there was a massive oil spill in the bay, causing economic and environmental stress around the Gulf. This is actually a picture of it. So you can kind of see how crazy it was. And then in 1990, a law called the Oil Pollution Act set out the penalties for corporations that spill oil in the Gulf of Mexico and nearby environments. So now they have to pay, like these companies are gonna have to pay to clean up, and they're gonna like held accountable for this. So this is a great thing that the government did for like the organisms. And this changed the oil dredging industry dramatically. And it's just spills becoming less and less common, which is great because we are becoming more and more reliant on oil. All right, so overall, oil spills are bad. The sediments and pollutions that come from rivers impact the coastline of the bay. Murky waters, habitat destruction, algae blooms, tourism loss, species decline, all of which are bad. So this guy right here is my emotion towards all of this. Bad. So what should we do to help? This is where my plan comes in. So first of all, spread the word. This is the most important thing anybody can do with any conservation plan. When I was researching, trying to find information on what current things they have set in place for the bay, specifically for the increased sedimentation and runoff and pollutions and stuff, and I could find nothing, barely anything. But I can assume that there's already a few conservationists out there who have taken notice to add more conservation to this area. They really just need to spread their word and specifically try to get in with the Mexican government because they do play a big role in this, and they may not be as concerned. They may not be aware of it, and make them aware. And then also, I believe there is resident industrial developments along the river that do have to follow certain minor regulations. Well, this guy right here is preaching it. He's saying, spread the word. So some other ideas are adding more big rocks and walls at the end of the river mouths to push debris into specific areas, which would aid protecting the bay's habitats. So instead of keeping it all clumped in front of the river mouth to where it blocks stuff coming in and out from the nursery grounds, push it to the side, and then that way you can develop like more able to keep habitats going on here, and then you have a section over here where it's more for that debris. And then adding dams along the rivers would control water output and separate the residential areas from the river mouths. There actually is a few dams, I believe, along some of the rivers. The Papalopan one has one, and but basically, if you put them there, you're able to control and like filter out the pollutions before they go out to the Gulf of Mexico and impact other parts, which once again, the Caribbean, the United States, all of that. And then adding preserves and tourist lookouts over the rivers would be great. I know that those two rivers that I see, which are both two of the major rivers that go into the bay, are beautiful, and just like a scenery I would love to go and visit if I could, especially this one over here with those big cliffs. So living in Florida, I don't see that, so I would spend money to go do that. And then having educational centers to inform the tourists of the issues. So in the middle, you can see some little examples, and it'd be a fun like vacation thing to do, and it would attract multiple tourists. Like, you have a beautiful river, use it as a tourist destination. And then adding more local parks along the rivers and fishing spots for the locals who rely on the river, just as like a way to help them and keep them aware of what's going on too. All right, and then on to the Terminos Lagoon. So it's the largest and one of the most biologically rich tidal lagoons located in the Gulf of Mexico. I think it's quite pretty. And I like how there's not that much development along it. You can see in this picture here. It looks like there's a little resort stuff going on and some man fishing. That's about it. The lagoon is heavily monitored and protected by Mexico. So it would be a good way to reach that government, and help them get an education center there where you can spread the word about the nearby rivers and the bay and all this stuff. So I bolded, utilize the lagoon as the tourist education center. It's one of my ideas. And then this is the bay right here, and this is the lagoons. You can see in relation to, they're basically a part of each other. Okay, so why my plan and what I do for the bay? As a biology major, we study how organisms are impacted by their environments. The study of ecology and evolution can play a major role in the conservation efforts. So studying up close and personal how these tarpon and other marine animals that live there are impacted by these pollutions and sedimentation would be a great way to see how bad the situation really is. And also you get to learn a few things and how you can help them. Overall, this would allow you to more fix the conservation plan to be more specific towards what actually needs to be done at a smaller level. So budgeting. This is the most important thing when dealing with conservation plans. So for short term, obviously use some of that tourist money and some tax paying money to build more parks and preserves, because then that kind of will make money for itself when you build those, and spreading the word out and getting more people to come to them, vacationers and all this stuff would really help with budgeting and money and economy. And then phase 2 would be adding those educational aspects, and those cost a lot of money to obtain because you have to have researchers and education specialists and people to maintain the facility as a whole. So you need a long-term budget for this. So this is where you would have to get investors and donations to help you keep those places going. So phase 3, be finding ways to build more dams and add rock/walls in the river mouths. So this is more of like getting the stuff done, like working to get it done versus like spreading the word. So this we would have to rely more on the government help because you'd have to get them all approved. This is where you would want to start campaigning with the government to get their attention. And then capitalizing on tourism once again is going to be a great plus for the government to boost the economy. So overall, the overall conservation plan for the marine protected area location is to limit the impact that the increase in tropical storm formation in the bay has had on the marine ecosystems. With the formation of more preserves, tourist locations, river mouths, dams, educational facilities, the increase in sediment and runoff will be more controlled and less threatening to marine habitats nearby those ecosystems. So yeah, I hope you vote for my conservation plan for whatever you're voting for. And that's all, folks.